Tony Jimenez. I am the Dean of Chicano Latino Student Affairs at the Claremont Colleges, and we're very excited to have Rompiendo Fronteras featuring Professor Giovanni Ortega, Ernie González, and Teddy Rodriguez. The purpose of this Zoom presentation is to have a conversation between three artists and academics who must navigate the world between their Latinx and queer identities. They will impart some knowledge and expertise on how to face the challenges that come across in higher education and also in Hollywood. So I'm going to provide more information of each of our presenters and speakers. So Dr. Teddy Alexis Rodriguez-Velez is an independent scholar and an actor, writer, director based in Los Angeles. He currently studies inclusion, diversity, and equity in theater, education, and in the media. He also freelances as a multiculturalism and inclusion consultant. He has a bachelor's in theoretical physics, not bad, in theater arts and master's in physical science and doctorate, fine arts, and in theater. Ernie González is a bilingual actor whose credits includes co-starring in TV roles such as Carol's Second Act, which is on CBS, Indebted on NBC, One Day at a Time on Netflix, Grace and Frankie also on Netflix, Alone Together on Freeform, American Crime on ABC, Training Day on CBS, No Tomorrow on the CW, and he's come out on the Jimmy Kimmel Live on ABC. Ernie also has appeared in national commercials for Sonic, Rite Aid, Lowe's, Nopalina, and has performed in the regional theater across the country. La Mama off-Broadway, Creative Place Theater off-Broadway, the Milwaukee Repertory Theater, the Second City in Chicago, Brown and Company, the Victory Garden Theater, the Ohio Shakespeare Festival, to name a few. He's a proud member of SAG-AFTRA, AEA, and the Television Academy of Arts and Sciences.
Thank you. Nopalina is Mexican fiber.
Okay.
Just had to throw that out there.
All right, no problem. Last but not least, we have Professor Giovanni Ortega, professor at Pomona College. Gio has been very instrumental here in the Latinx community and also different community, LGBTQ community at the Claremont Colleges, the API community. He's definitely an asset and jewel here at Claremont and a very wonderful part of the CLSA familia. Professor Ortega earned his undergraduate degree at the University of Illinois Chicago, and also he got his Master's of Fine Arts at the University of California, Los Angeles, or UCLA. So without further ado, the stage is yours, las tías.
All right. First of all, thank you so much, Dean Tony Jimenez, and Associate Dean Xochitl Casillas and Miriam Escobedo for having us today. We do want to acknowledge that although we are in all different parts of the world, Claremont Colleges is in Tongaland, so we want to acknowledge the people and the indigenous people who came before us. So Dean Tony and I was just like kicking it one day, and we haven't seen each other in a while, and this is how our conversation starts. He's like, Giovanni, do you want some hopia from National City? You want some fun from National City? And of course I'm like, yes. And so that's how the conversation started with nourishment of food and familia, So I was like, I think it would be a really cool idea to have a conversation with these two amazing Latinx professors and artists as well, who is here today, Dr. Teddy Rodriguez-Velez and Professor Ernesto González Jr. And as we talked more about it, I was like, I've been here for quite a while, and I've never felt like, oh my goodness, although the school has been family, there's a different sensibility of being queer and being brown that creates a newfound familia, right? And so we chatted one day, and it was like, and that's how it came about to be called the Tias. So we became the Tias, it was just like, we were just talking. And so today is just a conversation between the three of us, and how we navigate the world being Latinx and queer, and all the different identities that we hold space for. So I'll start. Like I said, my name is Dean Tony says, my name is Giovanni Ortega, and I actually identify as Indigenous Filipino, Chinese, and Spanish. So I'll start there. I'm two spirits, I'm gender fluid, and that is something that I've come to embrace as my identity, and I'm very proud of that. So I'll popcorn to Professor Ernie.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm so happy to be here and to share space with all these lovely people. I'm Ernie, and I am a first-generation bilingual gay Mexican American is how I identify as. And I will pass it off to Teddy, Dr. Rodriguez.
Thank you. So my name is Teddy. I identify as Afro-Latinx, LGBT. I connected with Gio and Ernie because we're talking about how rare it is to have a Latinx professor. More rare is to have a Latinx queer professor. And in Pomona this semester, you have 3 professors that are, crossing paths at the same time, and how rare that is. And that's why I felt that this was really special to do. And yeah, what else do you want me to do? Afro-Latinx, LGBT, that's me.
Thank you so much. So we'll just have a few questions, and then we'll answer it, and then we'll open it up for question and answers. And also, if people have any questions in advance, go ahead and ask it. I don't want to be so rigid with how this conversation is. We want to open it up for everybody else, right? So as we call it, as my abuela calls it, merienda time. Merienda chisme. So I think what the first thing is, the first prompt for the 3 of us, and I'll answer at the end, is like, when I was a kid, how was it growing up being brown and being queer? Ooh, like each of these questions, mind you, everyone, is an episode, right? But we're gonna condense it as much as we can. Ernie, thoughts on that? Being brown.
I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and there was like one white family in my high school. And I went to grade school a little in Juarez, Mexico. So back when the border, there was not a lot of weight. And so it was a very back and forth kind of life we lived in El Paso. And I really didn't realize how much of a minority I was till I left El Paso. And when my undergrad was in San Marcos, and it's Central Texas, but I don't know, 10 hours away. And I was just in complete culture shock. Like I was the only Latino, the only gay person in the program. And I felt so alone. And I always remember feeling, anytime I walked down the quad, like feeling, if someone took a picture and they'd ask, one of these things is not like the other, like that's just my brown gay ass right there. So that was kind of a very rude awakening, and it was hard, and it was in Central Texas. And I think why we've kind of really formed this unofficial affinity group was because we all had these kind of terrible stories of undergrad and not being represented, and I've being told, oh, you get rid of, this is not my natural speaking voice. My accent back then was literally beat out of me because I was told you will play nothing but gardeners and farmers if you don't speak better English. It's a different time. And then when I went to grad school in Ohio, I was still the only gay Mexican, but they were like, oh, you're Mexican? Oh, that's so hot. Like, it was just a total weird turnaround. Like in Central Texas, they were like, oh, gross. And then now that I was in Ohio, it was like, ethnic and exotic. So I just kind of went through a lot of evolution, but I do remember just that first feeling when I moved to Central Texas of like, oh, El Paso is different and not everywhere is like El Paso, and just kind of that feeling of not feeling safe, you know? And then on top of all that, you add, you know, the being gay thing, and as you know, in our kind of, well, a lot of us live in the intersectionality. Those are all just different layers of challenges and issues to overcome.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that. Actually, I want to add to that, Ernie. Thank you for your share. As I was like kind of like looking back in my history in these identities, I think that one of the most prominent things that comes up, and I both of you can respond to this, is religion, right? I grew up very Catholic, right? I like my abuela would I slept with my abuela, and we would wake up and pray, and you have San Martin de Porres, San Lorenzo Ruiz. There's all these things that surround us, right? So I think my upbringing, that's my father said, part of my upbringing was so infused in Catholicism and everything that comes with it. How was it for you, Ernie, or Teddy? How was that? Did that kind of inform, do you think, culturally as a queer person for you?
Yeah, I mean, that was just one of those roads of intersect, you know, it was the religion thing. And then also just like the machismo Mexican thing that you're expected to act a certain way. And, you know, so that absolutely totally had to do with the upbringing, which, you know, now kind of once you move past all that, you become grateful for it, because, you know, it's going through those tough times and that adversity that makes you who you are. And, you know, it's something to be proud of, even though it's taken me 28 years. I'm not 20, to kind of overcome this hurdle. Gio's the oldest. We always have this discussion. Let's stop there.
But the youngest looking, everybody. Look at that, foundation. I'm telling you this. I'll pass it on to you, Dr. Teddy. Your thoughts.
I am the youngest, just for the record. And also for the record, I received a list of colors that I was allowed to wear today. Both Ernie and I did. So just so you all know. So the religion thing actually was a good experience for me. And I'm going to tell you why. Because my mom was, so this is what happened to me. My sister and I were watching a show called Christina, which is like Oprah. You guys know Christina, most of y'all. And there was a gay panel that day. And we were like 11. This is in the middle of the AIDS pandemic. And my sister, who is the evil twin, she's my twin, she said to my mom, "What would you do if one of your kids was gay, Mom?" Clearly signaling, right? And my heart just stopped. And my mom was like, that'll be okay. He or she will be my kid, and you know, that's what God wants me to do. And I didn't come out at that moment, but I knew it was going to be okay when I was ready to come out. So that's how I grew up. However, I'm Afro-Latinx, so the Black experience is a little different, because in the Latinx communities, because I am born and raised in Puerto Rico, we don't acknowledge that experience, nor we acknowledge the indigenous experience. We just hide ourselves in the ethnicity part of it, which is the Latinidad of it, Puerto Rican or Mexican or Dominican. And we just had a lot of struggles. Some struggles was as superficial as the hair. We didn't know how to do our hair. There was no products for Black people in the island. And the identity part of it was just really strange to me, because I was so connected with my African part, and I didn't know what that meant until I was probably in my teens. And then add to that, the gayness of it all is just a good mix of messiness that it really informed what I wanted to do, because when I started going to college, I started working on diversity programs right away. It just really has been driving my scholarship and my efforts academically. So it was a blessing in disguise.
You're from Ponce, is that right? I forget what part of Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my hometown.
Yeah. You know,
Is that the one town you know in Puerto Rico?
No, I do know El Junque.
That's not a town. That's not a town. That's a forest.
Come on. Hey, I spent some time in Culebra. I almost had to come back because it was just stunning. But you know, you really touched on something that's really important in regards to, you know, I think it's very American of us to think sometimes that someone who has various identities only is in this kind of, in this nation, right? So I really, and it's coming out now, like Afro-Latinidad, and even for myself, who really had to grapple with this whole notion of, well, my mother's side is Spanish, right? But then that was utilized as that, and I'll state this here, is that when I was growing up, that was utilized as something better. I have Spanish blood, right? As a Filipino. And so that was always infused at me. And that was really hard to grapple with for the longest time. And whenever I would say that, I would be like, called out. It's like, you're being colonial. What kind of colonial mentality do you have? And I'm like, but that's my family, right? Part of my family. But I realized that there's this kinship in my cultural history that I found, that the forced colonization of my people by the Spaniards, right, infused with the shared experiences of Latin America in retrospect with indigeneity and Spanish colonialism is the thing that makes me me. And that's why I have this underlying love and identity for this culture that other Filipinos don't actually have, right? So I think it's really important to note that Latinidad is not just one thing, right? So yeah, can you expand more a little bit about that, Teddy? Especially, I mean, it's not my space to talk about Afro-Latinos, Afro-Latinas and Latinxes, but I want to create that space for you.
Great question. Again, we do need like an hour just to expand on that.
Okay.
But I growing up, that Afro-Latinx wasn't even a word. The only word that I remember that I could use was Afro-Caribbean, which is so big because the Caribbean looks small, but it's so diverse and so many things happen in the Caribbean, so many languages, so many races. There's a lot in just the Caribbean. And, but all of those things live together. So for example, I consider myself Afro-Latinx. However, I'm pretty sure that if I do a DNA test, I am going to have Spanish in me and I'm going to have indigenous in me. However, I know that I'm making a conscious choice of just identifying that way because it will be a little easier for me, even though the mixed experience is something that I need to acknowledge as well. So we fight it all the time. However, we need to be aware of the colonialism of it all, because we do tend, if we talk about art, and let me not get too professory here, we tend to really dismiss a lot of Black and indigenous forms just because they don't fit within what we feel is the form. Like Aristotelian form, oh, it doesn't have any, well, that's not how we write. That's not how we create. So why are you putting these lenses on these things that have nothing to do with that? And we do it all the time. Just 2 weeks ago, somebody was going off because reggaeton, which is arguably the biggest Latinx music for the last 20 years, is very hated in the island. And I believe that is because it has Black roots, because people keep comparing it with boleros and things that are clearly not in the same page, nor is the same form, nor comes from the same aesthetics. So yeah, that's all I have to say. That was a lot.
That would be episode 4 of
Yes, to be continued.
Let's move on, in regards to identity, and let's kind of veer into the industry. Oh my goodness. Yeah, how was that? I'll talk a little bit. So I was in the early 2000s when I was 10 or 11. So I got my agent in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And yes, Ernie, most of the roles that I was being sent for were gangbangers, right? And I think I would like for you to talk a little about this, because you do work a lot in the industry. It's like, I think it's really hard for a lot of actors of color, especially Latinx actors, who say, well, I'm never going to take that role because it diminishes who I am. But I'm like, I gotta make money, yo. You know what I'm saying? So how do you defend that, and how do you come to terms with things like that in regards to the different roles that you take on as a Latinx performer?
I mean, that's an excellent question, and for me, like, why the crux of why we're here. My advice to my diverse student actors is, first of all, there is a difference between study and performance, professional aspects. Hopefully there won't be. We are all here. I know your professors are fighting on, representation, and, hopefully there won't be this difference. But the fact of the matter is that there is. So my advice to student actors is, do not put yourself in a box. The industry will do that for you. When you're in study, don't let your teachers put you in a box. However, you should know what box your box is and be able, in my opinion, to play the F out of that box. Because when it comes to the profession, my motto is, I want to cash that check. So I have no problem, but also know that you always have agency. So, there was one role that I was like, not doing it, I'm not going to audition for. You can say, thank you, but I feel strongly to not want to audition for this. You always have agency. But at the end of the day, I approach everything through this professional lens. And if you are an Actors Equity actor, you have to work, and they've just upped it a certain amount of weeks to get health insurance. If you're in SAG, you have to make a minimum of $12,000, and that just went up a year, for SAG to get insurance. So there's these other, there's other things. So for me, that's never been an issue. I like to think that, and I mean, look at my IMDb, look at my reel. I play a lot of these roles, and I like to think that I approach these roles with my warm, funny self and my unique true north, and don't play stereotype. And so that's kind of how I feel okay with it. I'm like, well, that's a nice warm farm work. Like, I just like to think that I don't play stereotype, and that's how I feel more than glad to get paid a lot of money to say very few words and be, that type of role. And I do have to say that it is getting better, and even in academia, when I first started looking for jobs, I remember sitting there and being like, don't ask me if I'm married. Please don't ask me if I'm married. Like, being super worried about it. And now I'm very proud to say, oh, well, I've been with my partner for 17 years and you'll meet it, in the same way, my last 2 roles that were on the Fran Drescher show and Did It, and something else. Anyway, there were 2 weirdos that just happened to be Mexican. So it was just, I'm kind of getting into this spot where I play a lot of weird characters. But there was just like 2 weird guys, and we didn't know what their race was. We didn't know if they were gay or straight. It was just, it kind of was, that was not even on the table. So, I was very happy to play. And even on the Alone Together, one of the shows, the writer was, in it. And I told her, and every set is different. Sometimes you just stay in your trailer and just stay away because, it's just a job. We have a job just like anybody else's. And sometimes you get to do one day at a time and work with a Latino director and Latino people, and you feel great about, representation. And sometimes you're just going to cash that big ass check and they're going to kill you. But, this was a great set, and I said, hey, I want to thank you because you wrote this character who's a weird guy who just happens to be Latino and not a Latino. And a lot of people are kind of talking that talk, but I'm seeing that walk now. And it's not all the way there yet, I can't, for, what was it, the best featured actor in comedy, I think, I can't say because of the Television Academy, but as a voter, I just to get nominated or whatever, it was 0.04% were just before the I nominate before you even get the nomination. And that was just so crushing. But I think it is getting better. And again, not to belabor a point, but my recommendation is don't put yourself in the box. The industry will do that for you, but know what your box is and cash that check and know that you have agency.
Thank you so much. How about you, Tia Teddy?
So my story is a little different because the island only has around 3 agents in the whole island, almost 4 million people. So the level, sometimes I feel like people don't understand that even to have a toilet is a privilege. So when I'm in Hollywood, I know that it's a privilege for me to just exist in this space because some people from the island cannot even make the transition to come here. And I respect everybody's path. Everybody has a different path. There's not a clear path that you can follow. It's just so different from everybody. I do always try to remind people that just because you have a space in the room, somebody probably made that space for you and came before you. So try to always make it better for the person that comes after you. So if you can advocate for the community, whatever community you identified as, or as the BIPOC community as a whole, or just for actors as a whole, very big, do it, because it's kind of like the karmatic thing that you should be doing. In my case, I didn't get a lot of opportunities until I started creating my own opportunities. And that's a path that I see a lot of people taking. And that's an alternate thing that you can do as well. Not alternate, another path. I don't see myself on screen a lot. We just had 2 shows that had Afro-Latinx LGBT people last year. The LGBT, if we talk about numbers, the LGBT as a whole increased in representation in the last 2 years. The BIPOC people within the LGBT representation went down. So those are things that I always looked at as a scholar, because we do have to keep track of what is happening, and that's what I do. And so I every time that somebody books a big role, I just applaud them and hey, take home some of that big check and create something for somebody else that is badass and representative and Latinx and gay as fuck. Do that. That's what I was saying.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, just to kind of piggyback on some of the nuggets that these two brought out. I think the idea of the question, Ernie, of are you married, is not just like not just jobs, right? But actually our family, and we're gonna veer off to that thing. Like I have so many tias and tios who have seen me every Christmas. They'd be like, Giovanni, are you married? And I'm like, when I find the right guy. I don't say it, but I think, it's really funny nowadays how that's kind of like shifted. But yeah, how about how about being queer in the industry? I mean, I think I'll kind of answer the first question and then segue into this one. I think it's really important, you know that box. Oh my goodness. Thank you, Ernie, because that's so important, right? Because sometimes when we're young, we're like, well, I'll make sure that I'll only do roles that are worthy, right? But I think that that idea of knowing your box opens it up because you're being represented, and then how you portray that box is really important, right? The whole idea of agency is another thing that I feel as a POC, we don't get to have, because sometimes we are just so hungry, right? So knowing that box and having agency are very linked together. But also, I think one of the things that I did, and this is now kind of segueing into me being queer, is that I had the directors that I worked with straight out of grad school, and I love them to pieces, right? Were very impressed by my work as a very effeminate, flamboyant queer. So I was kind of pigeonholed in these roles for a couple of years by straight allies and queer directors who only saw me as queer. And I'm like, yo, I am queer and I am brown. I'm like, that's really hard. That's slim pickings with roles, right? And I think kind of going with what Teddy said is that if the box is not there, create it, right? And I think that's one thing that I learned in the last decade, since I was 20, to really create content for people like me, right? For the longest time, I did it selfishly because I was like, well, I'm gonna write rules for me and write these one-person shows. But I realized that, oh my goodness, Minerva needs a role, Janet needs a role, Carlos can write, and that's how these communities form together and come together and start these different collectives. And I think that's one thing that I'm really proud of now, is I'm able to actually develop narratives for POCs and marginalized communities. So now you could write roles for queer people also who happen to be of a different identity and not have to abide with a certain box, for that matter. We're expanding that box. Now let's kind of veer into like having to be straighten it up when you go into auditions as a straight male going into auditions. What are your thoughts about that and your experiences?
Me first?
Go for it.
I sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. I had an experience where in one of my first acting classes, college level, so I went to a performing arts high school. So when I got to college, there wasn't a theater program. There was just a theater, what they call a theater section, which is just technically like a minor program. So I remember the professor, I wanted to do this show where the guy, it was a 2-people show, 1 girl, 1 guy. And the guy was this drug addict that tried to rape this university student. And yeah. And it's actually a good show. It sounds horrible, but it's a good show. And the professor, the acting professor, was like, you can't do that. And it just ignites something on me. Like, well, that's the one we're going to do. So we did it, and we did the scene, and it went really well. And then he apologized to me. And then I decided to do that show. And I feel like when I did the show, because we mounted the whole show, I murdered the masculinity in me, because after that, I wanted to be so LGBT. So I've been doing that. So sometimes I do want to bush it up a little bit, but most of the time if the role doesn't have enough meat in it, I just try to play a little on the gay side to see if they see something better. If you look at my AMBD, it's like the opposite of Ernie. I can barely book anything. So maybe that's why. But I sometimes I do it. I try not to do it anymore. I feel like I know how I know I can do it, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
Yeah, it's that's such a hard yeah. So I I don't even go out for that many gay roles, and I wish I did. And when I do, it's kind of a lot. It's a lot of, I almost had my first series regular, and it was a gay nurse and everything, and I went all the way to the end, and it was just really great. And then it went to Cedric Yarborough. They went in a total different direction, and they booked like a famous person. And that was, that's just part of the job. And for that, I did feel a little bit more comfortable. But, I think, first of all, the best thing about this other three of us is there's just no one way, there's not just one way. So like I live in this spectrum of masculinity that, and I don't think being femme is bad, but I just kind of, I don't want to say that I'm convinced. I don't know. I live in a certain spectrum of masculinity that it's not really that much of a concern. Like, I spend all my time thinking, where's the comedy in this? Or what is this role's function in this script? And what, that kind of takes up a lot more of my mental space than just like, the other thing. And then maybe it does come off a little femmy and I don't get called back. I mean, that's just kind of, that's not part of my process anymore. Unless it's, a gay character. And I'm like, okay, I can be just a little bit more comfortable. But I don't want to push that either, because like, if you're a gay character, it doesn't mean that, you're all the way to the other spectrum of the femininity, which is fine too, so and this is kind of in my camera classes, just to say, always sit in your own truth, and you are unique, you are enough. As soon as I try to be, always start kind of with you, and then work your way to what your role is in the script. So that is actually something that I haven't thought of since that big gay nurse audition. And then other than that, I mean, that my stuff's up because I just had an audition for commercial today, and that was kind of like the least of my worries. Is how masculine I am, just me.
Thanks to you, Ernie. And then if he books that job, we'll be getting $7 Starbucks cards for everyone in this room.
Affordable.
I promise.
That's so funny. I think it's really important to go back to what you said earlier, and I'll speak for myself, right? Because of an upbringing that was so permeated with machismo and what it is to be male, that really kind of fucked me up in the head, right? And I think that kind of seeps into your work as an actor when you don't say this to straight people, right? An actor is an actor, but for some reason,
I'm still fucked up.
Actor, you're slightly different, right?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in the projects, on food stamps, on government cheese. To this date, even at West Hollywood, even in the club at West Hollywood, I don't feel comfortable holding my partner's hand because I'm like, I'm gonna get jumped. Someone's gonna beat my ass, and that's all kind of just deep trauma that I'm working on. But yeah, that's a very interesting. Yeah, that kind of has a role in it.
Thanks. Oh my, we have 13 minutes left, but I do want to lead into academia, right? How was that for you? I mean, I'll be real quick. So for the longest time, my mom would say, "Oh, my son goes to UCLA." I'm like, I'm in UCLA for acting, Mom. She never says acting. And then for several iterations of like speaking in universities, teaching in different schools, and now at Pomona College, she's like, "My son's a professor," and I'm like, professor of performance and directing, right? So how was that journey for you? And what made you decide to go this route, getting an MFA and actually getting your PhD, Teddy? And do tell us a little bit about that. I'll go with Teddy first.
Um, that's a very hard question to answer. The bachelor's and the master's was kind of like a very organic progression for me, just because I am a second generation college student. So my parents were just kind of gearing me towards that. So when you graduate high school, you'll go to college, and they knew how to navigate that, and they knew the Pell Grant and all of that stuff that first generation people usually don't know. So that was easy, and I got full right into my master's program. However, when I decided to get a PhD, I love academics. It just suits me to like a glove. I love the schedule. I love the syllabus. You give me a syllabus and I'll follow it. It's just perfect for me. Schedule? Are you kidding me? I want to prepare 15 weeks out. I know how to do that. So when I went to get my PhD, I thought that was going to be an experience like never before. I get to design my own curriculum. I get to decide what I'm going to do research. And they were interested. One of the directors of the program told me, "You're here to be seen, not heard," which really signaled what I was doing there. I was just there to increase their diversity numbers, but not to actually create anything for me. I was discouraged to do anything Latinx. I was actually given projects that were specifically either white or white supremacist, which we can talk about that. And it was very damaging, that experience for me. I don't know if that's what you wanted me to talk about, but when people ask me about my experience, I know that the PC thing to say is just, I had a great time, look at me with my comma PhD signature. The money I can pay. The emotional currency that took from me, I don't know if I ever will be able to pay it back, because it took a lot out of me. So I'm kind of in the middle of it. And even though it's been almost 10 years, but I don't know if that makes sense. I know I'm rambling a lot, but that's how I can express it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because now I wasn't going to share that I also had a very damaging undergraduate experience, and was in school and then took some time off because of those kinds of pressure, and also had to go back home and make money for my family. Went back, but overall, into graduate school was very organic. My undergraduate school was very much on Stanislavski and technique and acting and all that stuff. And then my graduate school was a musical theater program, so it was very much about body and voice. So I feel like my training is what I needed. In undergrad, I never was cast in one main stage, never. I came close, and then I was told that for the Shakespeare Taming the Shrew, they wanted to go with a very European look to it. However, every semester I did sometimes even upwards of 20 studio shows. If you were cast in the main stage, that's all you couldn't do anything else. You can do anything outside of school. So I wasn't cast in the main stage, but I was doing literally, one point I was doing like 8 shows at a time, and we rehearsed at 2 in.the morning because I was doing free time, so I think that training was a lot better for me than to be in a main stage show or whatever. Anyway, so I got my master's degree because I needed to round out my training, and also I love academia, and it was always my dream to be a teacher of acting at the university level. And I thought, I'm Latino, I know what I'm talking about. As soon as I graduate with my MFA, I'm going to be a tenured professor. That did not happen. And it does not escape to me the pipe dream of being a professional actor is what has worked out for me, and that it does not escape to me how crazy that is. But that to me was always just like a pipe dream, and I'm glad that I didn't get a job right away, because after grad school, I graduated in Chicago, and I did the Second City Conservatory. I did a Meisner program. Most of even a clowning school. Like most of what I teach now is actually like stuff that I learned after school. So again, everything happens for a reason, and your journey and your path is your own, and you're not to compare it to anybody else. But I love it, and I love Pomona, and I love Pomona students a lot.
Thank you so much. Well, it's 53 past, and we want to open it up for some, if you have some preguntas or questions, hit us up right now. Yusuf.
You guys touched upon this a little bit, but do you ever feel accepted in sort of the theater realm, or do you feel like there's this constant need to code switch a lot of the time?
Constant need for what? I'm sorry.
Code switch. So like being sort of different personalities, like you talked about, sort of needing to be more masking it up for like auditions and stuff.
I'm going to be really honest. Right now, I'm in a very good space. Like, I am a company member at the Ohio Shakespeare Festival, and pretty much have guaranteed Shakespeare work every summer. And even off summer, they have a good role for me. So the roles are just kind of offered. But I've been doing shows up there since 2007, and also with I've been here for 7 years, and so casting, all these jobs that you see me, I've been in front of those casting directors sometimes 6-8 times. Like, it doesn't just happen for the way you think it happens. So a lot of these casting directors I already have a close relationship with and know me and know what I do, and there's power in it, because I'm like, okay, so I don't feel that code switching. I feel very proud to be who I am. And again, focus on what the script, how can I service the script, and what is that character,
I think that's, thanks, Ernie. You brought up something that's really important, meeting with the same casting directors. I think at the end of the day, it's like, if you are who you are and you have really good relationships with people, working relationships, they remember that hopefully regardless of the color of your skin or your gender or sexual orientation or religion, right? And I think we do find those people. I mean, for instance, I've been working with John Lawrence Rivera since forever, 2004. And
the 20s.
Yeah, and Tim Dang and all these amazing human beings who really see you for who you are. And that's what I recommend that you continue to do, is like create these relationships. Networking is not really a word that I like to use, because it's relationships that builds bridges, right? For a very long time.
And always nail it. Like, the best thing that can happen is like, oh, this is not a good role for him. And that's, I keep a log of all my auditions, and especially if I got a callback or a producer session and if I didn't end up getting the role, always see that project and who booked it and why. And 99.9% it's look. And there's power in that, because I cannot be maybe I can lose some weight, but I can't be taller or shorter or browner. Like, that has nothing to do with your talent and commitment. So for me, there's power in that.
Leila says, how does a queer Latinx learn, create what their box is? Super hypothetical. Oh my goodness. How much time do we have? Teddy, do you want to kind of answer that? Because you created content as well.
Yeah. So I always start with my own story. So it's not necessarily completely autobiographical, but as a writer, I start with, that's my seed. And my first seed is something that happened to me. And then I create from there. And so what you identify as, and usually that would be my main character. So my main character is always a gay Afro-Latinx guy that is from Puerto Rico. But all of the other characters are all different things that serve the story that I want to tell with that version of me. That's how I write. Some other people write differently.
And it's okay to model your aspirations, your career with people that already went before you, you know? So I say, oh, I'm kind of like if Nathan Lane and, what's that guy from I'm so bad. Zach Galifianakis had a gay Mexican baby. That's me. You know, like, so it's okay to kind of model who against people who went before you. And then if you find, like, I'm not George Lopez, but I'm not, you know, this kind of, like, then if you're unique, that's a good thing. That's to be celebrated. And that means that you do something unique that no one else does.
What is it like to be touched by Rita Moreno? I would die. I would pass out if she touched me.
She kissed me. She kissed me. I worked the whole week on that show, and it was so great. And yeah, I was just, you know, what I did. Some other, and I met. I'm so bad with names. Anyway, I really messed up. Like, what's your name? Jane from
America? No, it's not America.
Jane. Grace and Frankie.
Oh, Jane Fonda?
Okay, yeah. When I was on Grace and Frankie, I went up in front of Jane Fonda and I did this.
Okay.
And she went, hi, walked away. So once we were in the scene together, she's like, okay, it's not some weirdo. Anyway, after that, I always practice. So I practiced meeting Rita Moreno, and I went up and I said, hello, Ms. Moreno, my name's Ernie. I'll be playing Andy in this episode. And, you know, so I just practiced. Yeah, it was amazing. She's amazing. Very nice and very politically involved. Like she was talking about, you know, who the whole time I was there.
Rita Moreno used to go to the MLK marches back in the 60s. Yeah.
Yeah.
I touched Rita Moreno too, by the way.
I'll kind of answer Leela's question as well. I think creating your own box, sometimes you're destined to do, right? I do want to acknowledge the people who mentored, because, you know, I mentor students now, right? So I really have to acknowledge the people who mentored me, who gave me an opportunity, right? Like I said, John Lawrence Rivera. If Jose Luis Valenzuela did not direct the cabaret that I did for my MFA program that decolonized everything that I studied at UCLA for 3 years. And he was like, no, we're doing our own version of who you are, right? I wouldn't be here today, right? And then you have, like, for instance, Velina Hasu Houston, who paved the way as a Black Japanese playwright, right? So there are people who came before us who still kind of giving us, like, and the beautiful thing about that, and I hope I'm doing that, and Ernie I know is, and Teddy is like, oh, okay, you need help here. I'll hold your hand, you know, because they held my hand, right? And that's really important. And I think that's one thing that I feel akin with these two artists is that we're holding each other's hand. Like, even if Rita Moreno or not, right? I think it's really important that at the end of the day, we get to support each other, because it's really not that easy out there.
Yeah, I say this at absolutely every Pomona meeting, and I hope you know that I really mean it. Even if you're not ever in one of my classes at Pomona, I am here for you, and do not hesitate to email or contact me at all.
Ditto. You know, and Gio, I do want to mention that it does sound like inclusion is not that good, but we do have things coming up. There's a big push for Latinx representation in film that is happening right now. There's a lot of funds that got assigned to that. That will be happening probably coming up after COVID. A lot of Latinx content will be starting. The Black community just the last 2 years increased their numbers above their population. I don't believe it not necessarily means that we need to stop doing that work. There's other communities that are way underrepresented, MENA, Asian, and a bunch of things that still we need to work on. But we do have better things that are coming up too. So keep working at it.
Keep working on it. Well, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for having us. I'll pass it on to Dean Tony Jimenez.
No, no problem. So before we end this session, I would also like to thank our other co-sponsors, the Pomona College Department of Theater and Dance and the Harvey Med College of Institutional Diversity. Thank you, Teddy, Gio, and Ernie Las Diaz for taking time for doing this wonderful session. We all learned a lot. And I mean, when Teddy was describing his PhD experience, I was getting some trauma from my experience. So it brings back some memories. But definitely, hopefully, we'll be back on campus soon. And for all those of you who are still in the session, don't forget the CLSA. This is your casa. And hopefully, once things get better, we'll have some mofongo and some habichuelas.
I'm all about that.
All right,
Ready?
all right. And some hupia for you. Don't forget that. We got some hupia for you.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you, Theo, Tony, Miriam, everyone. Thank you.
Hey, no problem. Thank you for sharing.